this video we will be making empanadas. First off, we'll start with the dough. All you need is 3 cups of all-purpose flour, half a teaspoon of salt, a stick and a half of unsalted cold butter, 1 egg, and half of a cup of water. I decided to put the dough together in my mixer. You can also do this by hand or with a food processor, but my food processor is older than me, so this is what I'm using. I started off by adding the flour to the bowl, then the cold butter cut into cubes. Next I add the salt, the egg, and finally the water. Then I let that mix until it's all combined together. After a bit, you'll end up with a clumpy dough forming, as you can see here. I let that go for another minute or two until it's almost fully come together. Then I move the dough to another bowl and use my hands to bring it together the rest of the way. Once the dough comes together, we'll then go ahead and knead the dough. So we'll start off by flouring a surface and then taking the dough out and start to knead for about 5 minutes. And once the 5 minutes of kneading is done with, you'll be left with a nice smooth ball of empanada dough. And now there are 2 possible ways to form the shells. Number 1, you can divide the dough into smaller pieces. You'll end up with about a 1.5 inch wide ball. Then you can take each ball and roll it out with a rolling pin to create your shell, which will end up to be about 6 inches in diameter. Number 2, you can roll out a larger portion of the dough with a rolling pin, then take a bowl that would be about 6 inches in diameter and cut out each individual shell with a knife. I prefer method 1 because you don't have to constantly take whatever's left over at the end after you're done cutting your discs, then bringing it back together, rolling it out again. This creates a much tougher dough that's harder to work with and also less appetizing at the end. But this method is useful if you want perfectly circular shells, which would come out looking like what you would find at your grocery store. But whichever way you use is up to you. Try out both and see which one you like more. So now we'll move on to preparing the filling. So I'm going with beef for this one. I start off by dicing up half a Spanish onion. Then I put some olive oil in a pan on medium heat and throw the onions in and begin to cook them until they're lightly brown and translucent. Next, I add 1.5 pounds of ground beef to the pan. This will be seasoned with 1.5 teaspoons each of salt, black pepper, cumin, and garlic, as well as 1 teaspoon of chili powder. You can use more or less depending on how spicy you like it. I love olives, so I added about 15 sliced Spanish olives to the mix. You can leave these out if you're not a fan. Once the beef has been browned, I added 3/4 of a cup of tomato sauce to the mix and stirred until the beef was completely coated. The filling is ready to go, and once it is cooled down some, we'll be ready to form the empanadas. And here's my workstation all set up. I have a baking sheet covered with some flour, so when I put them on there, they don't stick. And with this recipe, I ended up with about 16 empanadas. So for each one, you'll take about 2 tablespoons of the filling and then go ahead and close the empanadas securely to make sure there is no leakage as they're cooking. You can fill them a little bit more if you feel like taking that chance. I usually do this with a fork. This can also be done by pinching the dough together and twisting it to form the seal and making it look all nice. I attempted to do this with one of them, but as you can see, I am not very good at it. I haven't learned. I'm a fork guy. So after this one, I just went ahead and went back to my fork. I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. I just kind of went at it and tried to figure it out as I went. That did not go well. I just went on pinching it, just trying to get the whole thing to seal together. Just picked it up, tried to squeeze it all closed, and ended up with a big ass dumpling. But I'm still gonna try to cook it, and whatever happens, happens. We'll see. And now you can see one more up close and personal. This was the last one I made. Once I got this nice and sealed with my fork, they are ready to be cooked. At my day job, I'm a scientist of sorts, so I decided to do a little experiment here. I decided to try to cook the empanadas in 3 different ways: baked, fried, and the air fryer, which I have never tried before in the past, so I wanted to test it out and see how they would compare to the 2 traditional cooking methods. And now these are all ready to go. And you can see my little reject there sitting in the corner as well. I started off with the baked one since these will take the longest. I prepared an egg wash with 1 egg and a little bit of water whisked together. And with that, we coated the top of each empanada. And in the back, you could see the one that I attempted to fold closed. So these will go in the oven at 375 degrees for 30 minutes. Next was my attempt at the air fryer. So I took a couple and coated them with oil, put them in the air fryer for 15 minutes at 375, flipping them over halfway through the cooking time. And in they go. I hope that they come out at least edible. We will see. And finally, I fried a couple in about a ½ inch of oil, heated up around medium heat. And these take only about 5 minutes to cook. Flip them over halfway through and you're done. So now you can see all 3 methods finished side by side. They all look very appetizing, but we're going to go ahead and give them a try and see which one I like best. Of course, I expect the fried ones to be the best, but we'll see how the air fryer compares and determine if it's worth going back to in the future. So here we go. We have all 3 side by side with my Cholula hot sauce ready to go next to it. So here on the left, we have the fried. Next are the air fried. And finally the baked. So for each one, I started off with 1 dry bite and then 1 with the hot sauce to compare each one. I wanted to see how the flavor was without any assistance, and the filling was delicious. I started off trying the fried one because I basically knew what I was going to get here. The dough was very crispy, flaky, tender, just kind of perfection. So next were the air fryer ones, which were interesting. They were somewhere in between fried and baked. The dough was crispy. The dough came out crispier than it would with the baked ones, but they felt a little bit drier than the fried ones. So I would do this again if I didn't want to cook them in as much oil and didn't have as much time to bake them. These take about half as much time to air fry than they do to bake. So consider that if you're thinking about using your air fryer. And finally, we have the baked. These came out much more smooth and soft compared to the other 2. The dough was very silky. And in conclusion, I thought all 3 were great. You can't really go wrong with any method, but of course the fried are always going to taste the best. But if you want to be a little healthier, you can go with any of the other 2 options and still be completely satisfied. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed and that you're excited to make some empanadas.